We're talking with Dr. Vince Greenwood about this study looking into the way that both Joe Biden and Donald Trump's speech can clue us into the state of their health, the state of their brain. What I would like to understand is, now that you've separated out the two different groups of issues with speaking that could potentially be signs of neurological problems versus just signs of aging, and Biden seems to have more of the sort of standard signs of aging, Trump has more of the potential signs of a neurological problem. I don't think that most people are interested in that because they truly just care about their ability to deliver a speech. I think a lot of people want to use it as a proxy for what sort of leader will they be? Will they be decisive? Will they be consistent with their stances they've established before? For those two different groups, do either of those, if you score poorly in either of those groups, does that say anything about your brain or how you might act outside of just your ability to speak?
Well, it very well might be, and the stakes are potentially enormous. And here I need to refer to what we call the Bible in our field, the standard DSM-5. It's the basic classification system for mental disorders. And I went through DSM-5 for the term they use. They switched from using the term dementia to using the term neurocognitive disorder because they thought it was a little less stigmatizing. But they had very specific criteria about whether one kind of crosses the line from some mild decline in their functioning into something that warrants that diagnosis. And the line involves a noticeable decline in one of 6 key areas of functioning. And these are broad areas like memory, attention, executive functioning. They call it social cognition. It's what we know as emotional intelligence. And so if you're with a patient and you're assessing them for possible dementia, you want to assess and see if there's been a decline in one of these basic areas.
Hey, I'm glad you're here. Listen, in order for the Damage Report to keep on going, we need viewers like you to become a member on YouTube. Can you click the join button on YouTube today? Thank you.
Now, of course, we can't assess Donald Trump or Joe Biden directly. If we did, we could give them tests and measure them in these areas. But there's one area, which is the verbal language area, that you don't need to sit down and give them tests. You can evaluate that on their speech samples, which is no problem getting. And so we did so we are evaluating both of them on that. And Trump is showing what I think most people would call decline. I would call it a moderate, medium-sized decline in verbal functioning. And that brings you right into the area where you can begin to think about a diagnosis of neurocognitive disorder. Not full-scale dementia, that's an erosion of really the capacity for independent living, but the beginning of something that's much more significant than normal aging. And I think that deserves to be in the conversation because of these particular verbal disfluencies that he is displaying. And if someone crosses that line and warrants that diagnosis, number one, they are usually on a downhill course. Very few people get back to normal functioning. The downhill course can be rapid. The downhill course is into full-scale dementia eventually. That even though we can only measure his decline in the area of language, it's very likely that he's experiencing, anyone that has that is experiencing some subtle decline in some of these other areas like memory and attention and executive functioning. So the implications are enormous, both for how he's functioning now, how he's functioning in the near future, and particularly when you think about a few years down the road.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I obviously, again, I'm not an expert on this. I believe that I had heard one of the concerns with I believe you termed it neurocognitive dysfunction, is emotional regulation. I've seen some people in op-eds try to sort of link it to the fact that he seems angrier, maybe more vindictive, which could just be a campaign tactic. Some people try to make the link that this could be a sign of some sort of neurological problem that he is that there could be a frustration or an anger. Is that one of the signs that someone could look for in this sort of thing?
Yes, emotional regulation is one of the sub-traits, if you will, of it's called social cognition, and someone who's proceeding in life rather well and has not had significant mood swings, has not had significant difficulties with emotional regulation. If they start to have this neurological decline, that's one of the things that could begin to go off the rails. Of course, with Donald Trump, he has, frankly, a lifelong difficulty with emotional dysregulation. There's so many biographies on him, and troubles with emotional regulation began appearing really in childhood and adolescence. But there's no doubt that if, in addition to his lifelong struggles with emotional regulation, that if he's also now in a process of neurological decline, that's going to just further lower the threshold. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. That's definitely that. I could definitely see that being a concern for someone who wields so much singular power. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. But I know this is obviously very important work. I know people are going to want to follow the work. Where can people keep up with the investigation that you're doing and then all of that?
Well, a couple of my colleagues have started a podcast that really zeroes in on these mental health issues, and it's called Shrinking Trump is the name of the podcast. John Gardner was the developer of the podcast, and you
appeared on the podcast recently, correct?
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'll be getting some of this material published and out to the public. But in terms of people that are immediately interested, I would refer them to that podcast, Shrinking Trump.
Awesome. And for anyone watching, we had Dr. John Gardner on a couple of months ago. And so if you'd like to hear a more in-depth version of this, where one half of the conversation isn't me, who knows nothing about it, then definitely check out that interview on Shrinking Trump. Doctor, thank you for giving us your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
When you click the join button and become a tier 2 member, you get access to all of our weekly top 10 lists. What are you waiting for?